कितना ही गहरा हो, भारत के प्रयास उससे भी ज्यादा बड़े रहे हैं, उससे भी ज्यादा दृढ़ रहे हैं।
In a world full of uncertainty from challenges thrown by pandemic and conflicts, safety and well-being of India's expatriates has been a central theme of Prime Minister Modi's foreign policy. The Indian government has stepped up whenever Indians have found themselves stranded on foreign shores in times of global crisis. Let me straight dive into 11 rescue and evacuation operations which have defined Prime Minister Modi's 11 years in government. Now, let's start with, in fact, the first one. In June 2014, Islamic State terrorists were making rapid advances in Iraq. A contingent of 46 Indian nurses at a hospital in Tikrit were stranded. After 23 days of massive, government push and pull, the nurses were rescued unscathed and were brought back to India on July 5th. In 2015, thousands of Indian nationals got stranded in Yemen as fighting between the Houthi rebels and the Yemeni government ensued. The Modi government launched Operation Rahat to evacuate Indian citizens. Since Yemen was not accessible by air due to no-fly zone announced by Saudi Arabia, evacuations were carried out by the Indian Navy via sea route. The government also sent then Union Minister V.K. Singh to oversee the operations. Under Operation Rahat, 4,640 Indians along with 960 foreign nationals from various countries were rescued. Then in 2015, Operation Maitri defined what India and India's global image was. In 2015, when earthquake wreaked havoc in Nepal and some parts of India, the Modi government announced Operation Maitri for rescue and relief mission in the neighboring state or country of Nepal. India deployed 12 heavy-duty military aircraft and helicopters. In addition to aiding Nepal, India successfully evacuated about 11,200 people as far as Operation Maitri is concerned. Operation Sankat Mochan was launched in 2016, and this was launched after a severe conflict erupted in South Sudan. As the situation worsened, the Modi government then announced Operation Sankat Mochan to rescue the stranded citizens from the conflict-hit nation. 600 Indians were rescued along with foreign nationals from Nepal and other countries during this operation. Exfiltration mission of 2019 was a tricky one. In April 2019, in Libya, as the situation worsened, hostilities grew in the strife-torn country, the Indian government decided to in fact, airlift to evacuate the entire contingent of the CRPF troops. They were to be removed from the conflict zone along with the Indian citizens willing to leave the country. Then came 2020 pandemic, and during this pandemic, ladies and gentlemen, two very important operations were launched. One was Operation Vande Bharat. As the pandemic grew, the flights across the various countries globally, in fact, were disrupted. There were no flights which were available. Many people, thousands of people were brought back. Indians were brought back in from bubble flights which were launched under Operation Vande Bharat. The Indians were brought back from UAE, USA, UK, Saudi Arabia. In a reply in the Parliament, the Ministry of External Affairs stated that it had provided assistance to 2.97 crore people under this operation. Simultaneously, Operation Samudra Setu was also launched during the COVID outbreak. The Modi government, in fact, launched this operation to rescue stranded Indians via sea route. The Navy deployed ships like Jalashwa, Magar, along with the other, in fact, assets to rescue Indians stranded in various countries. After this operation was wrapped up, 3,992 Indians were brought back home safely. Operation Devi Shakti was launched in August 2021 with the withdrawal, ladies and gentlemen, of the United States and allied forces from Afghanistan and Taliban's takeover. it precipitated a crisis in the country. Consequently, the government launched Operation Devi Shakti, under which 500 Indian citizens and additionally 110 Afghan Sikhs were safely brought back from Afghanistan. Then in 2023, Operation Kaveri was launched. The Modi government launched this operation to evacuate stranded Indians from war-torn Sudan. Under this operation, India evacuated 3,961 Indians and 136 foreign nationals from Sudan, from the Port Sudan to Jeddah on Navy ships, and then they were flown in on C-17 Air Force, airplanes to bring people back home. Operation Ganga was a very, very important operation which was launched in February 2022 as war broke between Russia and Ukraine. Hundreds, thousands of Indians, including Indian students, were stranded in Ukraine. The government launched Operation Ganga, and 18,282 Indian nationals were brought back via 90 flights. Ministers was also pressed in action to facilitate the operation. And the 11th operation that we are talking about is the Operation Ajay, which was necessitated after the October 7th, in 2023, following the terrorist attack in South Israel by Hamas and the counter operations by Israeli army. The safety of the Indian nationals was paramount. The Modi government launched Operation Ajay, and under this operation, 1,300 Indians were rescued from Israel. All of us have heard about these missions, but what goes behind the scenes to make them a success? Let me straight away go across to Union Minister Hardeep Singh Puri. I sat down with him to understand one of the most important rescue operation that India undertook, Operation Ganga. Hello and welcome to this special presentation on the 11 years of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's continuous governance. I'm being joined by Union Minister of Petroleum, Mr. Hardeep Puri. But it's not about his ministry. It is the other work that he has, a very important task that he has been assigned. And one of the topics that we are speaking today, sir, is about India's entire change of perception as far as help, repatriation and rescue of our fellow countrymen are concerned across the globe. One such operation which you were a special envoy was Operation Ganga in 2022. It was more or less a race against time. We'd appreciate, and our viewers would appreciate, if you could give us some insights about what went on in that operation. It was a massive exercise by the government of India.
No, I'd be happy to do that, and thank you for having me on your show. Before I attempt to give you insights, I want to do a little bit of context setting.
Please.
You see, you have a large population of Indian origin people overseas. Various estimates put 25 million, I don't know. There are a lot of people of Indian origin holding foreign passports. But in this particular case, I think what we should see is that we have a very young demographic. We have a demographic advantage, we have a young population, and these are our children who are on the lookout for quality education.
Yes.
Some of them find it difficult to seek admission here. They go abroad. Their parents spend a lot of money. Operation Ganga should be seen in the context of a prime minister being the only leader in the world who responded to the challenge on a real-time basis. I think in terms of time context, it is February of 2022. Large-scale hostilities broke out between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. Those affected a large number of Indian students who were studying in medical schools, mostly in the Ukraine. They were there in other countries too. But in the Ukraine, if I remember correctly, there were 28,000 students. Now, if you look at the geography of the area, and if people have to make an exit from a war zone, there are a number of countries from which they can go to exit. I was sent to Hungary in other words, to facilitate the exit of Indian students who were coming in from the Ukraine through a land border to Hungary. There were two border points. Others went to Romania, they went to other places. Well, the insights that we are talking about now since it's more than 3 years and a few months, now some of it is in the public domain, but not all of it. The fact of the matter is that when you have to extricate people out of a skirmish or a war zone with no one being able to tell you when the firing will happen, and the students have been seeking shelter in in bunkers in their respective cities all over the place. So there is a job of getting them to one place, arranging the logistics. But more than that, the logistics, etc., you can go and seek professional help from bus operators and so on. But there's something more. Somebody has to step in and speak to the political leaderships of those two countries. This the Prime Minister was able to do. I know of at least two cases where cessation of hostilities was brought about specifically at the instance of the Prime Minister so as to give us time for those convoys to move. You had to move people out, you succeeded. Our airline stepped in. A lot of our students had pets with them. Some of them didn't even want to leave the pets behind. I argued with some of them in Hungary. I said, if you bring pets who are used to cold polar climates, how will they survive? But there's no arguing. I had to call the head of two of the airlines and say, "Bhai, aane do." Then we had to make arrangements here. So all in all, it was a big effort. But the fact is that we got them all out, and we're the only country that did that. And in the process, of course, we were receiving requests from students who were nationals of other countries. I think we pulled out some people, some students who were citizens of our neighboring countries, even American citizens, because no one else in the world did it. And that is, I think, what distinguishes our Prime Minister from most other leaders in terms of his caring. Anyway, if a war breaks out and some people get caught in the crossfire, you can always say, well, this is a war-like situation, what do we do? But it was not that. There was a war, we stepped in. I mean, the fact that you send 4 or 5 ministers to different countries, one went to Poland, one went to Romania, I went to Hungary, and 2 others went to other countries, and we coordinated the exit. Then we arranged for the airlines to come and take them so that they didn't have to. Well, some interesting stories. Some of the students who came out, they were so well looked after, making arrangements. They said कि आप ऐसे करिए, हमें 2 दिन बाद की फ्लाइट पे भिजवा दीजिए, मीनवाइल जरा बुडापेस्ट को देख लें. हमने कहा जी नहीं, ऐसे नहीं होता. आपने देख लिया बुडापेस्ट को, अभी आप you should be headed back.
Let me also ask you, because you did elaborate how the Prime Minister was himself involved. Does a leader who has a political or a personal capital with world leaders, does it help in such situations?
Of course it helps.
And how does it help?
It helps because the call is taken, and the call is taken seriously. I mean, there were nationals of other countries also stranded there. I don't know what happened, but nobody took the trouble. So first is absolute care for your own citizens, especially young people who are stranded. Then putting things together. I remember I was in somewhere in the northeast. I was late at night. Luckily, I was still awake. I got a call saying that the Prime Minister will speak to you, and he said कि मैं आपको भेज रहा हूँ, etc. No questions asked. Next day I was there. All of us arrived back from wherever we were, and there was a briefing. And immediately after that, the rest is history. And I know that he made calls to Presidents Zelensky and Putin to get those 2 instances where I am aware of the ceasefire.
A lot of people would say that, caring for your own countrymen, and there have been other operations in the past which previous governments would have done. Why is this special? What does it make unique?
First of all, whenever we're having a discussion like this, I, for one, I would be hesitant, I would be reluctant to undermine any other relief operation, because I'm not familiar with it, and each attempt to evacuate people, whether it's from the Gulf, it is important for its own sake.
Absolutely.
But what I can do is to talk about Operation Ganga and tell you, if you look at relief missions or evacuation mission, by any standards of global assessment, this would rank as one of the very well executed missions.
I remember one tweet by late former Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj, who had once said that if you're an Indian, even if you're stuck on Mars, the Indian embassy there would also come.
No, that's very.
Does that underline the foreign policy under Prime Minister Narendra Modi?
Yes, absolutely. It does. I'm not suggesting that governments under other prime ministers have not been sensitive. They have been. But especially so in Prime Minister Modi's time. He has given a very important prioritization to the Indian origin people there, the diaspora. He has addressed large gatherings. He has individually reached out, and I think in his foreign policy overall canvas, you can take people out of India. You don't take the Indian out of the person. You may hold another country's passport, but I think they relate to your culture. We're a 7,000-year-old civilization. It's only 1% of that time as an independent country. But we have a long way to go. We've reclaimed our civilizational heritage and value system, which we had regrettably, we tended to lose in between. But the most important thing is when people, Sushma ji's put it very well, I don't know. When I was Housing Urban Affairs Minister, people used to ask me, when we did the Chandrayaan landing, when are you South Pole pe colony kab kaat rahe ho? So it's a nice way of putting it. But wherever Indians have been in distress, I think the government has reached out, and it's also exemplified by what's happened subsequently. The legislative amendments that we made, we brought back people. I remember troubles took place in Afghanistan. I brought and the Gurdwaras came under attack. I had the deep privilege of carrying the Soropas and being able to contribute in a small way. So Article 370, all this is part of our history. And Ganga only stands out, Operation Ganga, as one of those important strands in between.
Minister, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Every mission has different challenges, whether it is a mission under pandemic or during a strife-torn or a war situation where it's a race against time. How does the government work and ensures that all these missions work smoothly? Let me very quickly bring in at this moment Mr. Harshvardhan Shringla, former Foreign Secretary, who has a ringside view of many of these operations. Thank you so much, sir, for speaking to us. Let me start by asking you, India has made safety and well-being of its population outside the country a central theme of its foreign policy under Prime Minister Narendra Modi. How has all this come into play?
So, under Prime Minister Modi's leadership, I think the concepts of India first and no Indian left behind have been very much part of our foreign policy efforts. When I was Foreign Secretary 2020 to 2022, we saw at least 3 of such evacuation missions undertaken. The first was in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. You would recall that a lot of Indian nationals were stuck across the world because lockdowns were declared around the same time, not just in India, but in countries across the world, and international flights were not, taking place. So we had to get all these people back, but it was also important to understand when it was the right moment to undertake this. And when it was felt that this was the correct moment, then the government launched what would be considered to be the largest evacuation exercise in the world in Vande Bharat. That was one. The second was when the Taliban was entering Kabul, and there was a transition phase between the government in Afghanistan and the Taliban taking over. And we had to evacuate our nationals at that time of conflict and uncertainty. And that was called Op Durga Shakti. And the third, and the one that you're referring to, which is probably the most important in many senses, was when the Ukraine conflict broke out. And we found that we had some 25,000 nationals in Ukraine, including 22,000 students, mainly medical students studying in medical colleges across Ukraine, many of them in conflict zones. And that operation was called Op Ganga. And that is the one that I think caused most amount of concern because of the students and the number of people involved, and also the fact that evacuations were taking place right from the midst of conflict zones. And in all of these evacuations, I think Prime Minister Modi led from the front. His guidance and his overall, I would say, oversight of these missions was critical in ensuring that the missions went according to a certain plan, that there was full coordination between the different departments and agencies of the Government of India.
Give us an insight, sir, because operation during COVID pandemic time must have presented its own share of complications and challenges. Could you elaborate on how these operations were conducted?
So there are three levels of challenges here. The first was, I think, for the government to determine when it was a good time to actually start bringing back our people home, because we were under strict lockdown. And, bringing people back meant that we had to also deal with, the infections that came with it, because COVID-19 was rampant across the globe. There were different strains of the virus which were prevalent. And then that involved a lot of, I would say, inter-ministerial consultations. I remember Prime Minister Modi himself held very high-level meetings with the involvement of the Home Minister, Defence Minister, External Affairs Minister, a number of key ministers who were involved, and the Secretary is concerned. And I remember also that as Foreign Secretary, I made that presentation on the status of Indians stranded across the globe, but also I would say, different, conditions prevailing in different parts of the world that were inhibiting easy evacuation, because people had quarantines, people had lockdowns, countries had different rules and regulations. So it wasn't easy to conduct an evacuation without very meticulous planning and attention to detail. And once it was considered that it would be opportune to get our citizens back, because keep in mind that they were also in dire straits. There were people all over the world. I remember there was a group that was in Peru on tourism, and they were completely stuck in that country, in a distant part of the world. There were people, many of our young people working in cruise ships, and they were stuck in places like Japan and other places. There were many different types of situations that we had to encounter in terms of, bringing our nationals back. And at that time, I think arrangements were made to not only bring back people to main cities. The idea was to make sure that they went as close to home as they could. So if you were from, Andhra Pradesh or Telangana, you flew to Hyderabad. If you were from, the north, you flew to Chandigarh or Delhi. If you were in the east, you flew to Kolkata. So that sort of arrangement was made to ensure that, people were dropped off as close to their homes as possible.
Rescue operations in a war zone or a conflict situation are always a race against time. Tell us in detail about what happened in Afghanistan operation.
No, absolutely right. I mean, the difference between an operation where you're bringing back people home and bringing back people home under duress, which is basically under conflict situations, is totally different. But in both in Devi Shakti and in Op Ganga, we had conflict situations, and we had to bring back people quickly before the situation became worse, and that there was possibility of casualties. In the case of Afghanistan, as you know, the Taliban takeover was very swift. And you had the beginnings of some fighting in the outskirts, but you suddenly found that the Taliban made very rapid advances, and before you knew it, I think it was around 14th or 15th of August 2021 when the Taliban had entered Kabul, and a lot of our citizens who were working across Afghanistan had come to Kabul and were essentially had to be airlifted out. And we mounted a huge exercise because we used Tajikistan as a staging point, simply because there wasn't enough space in Kabul airport to accommodate aircraft. So the bulk of our aircraft, the commercial aircraft, flew to Tajikistan, where we had an arrangement, and the Tajiks allowed us to use their airport on the border with Afghanistan. So that was the base. And from there, our military aircraft flew sorties into Afghanistan, into Kabul, picked up citizens and brought them back to Tajikistan, where they were put into commercial flights and brought to India. So that worked much better because of two reasons. One is that the Americans who were in charge of Kabul airport allowed only military aircraft to operate from there. And the Pakistanis did not allow military overflights over their territory, so only commercial flights could overfly, which meant that if you didn't overfly Pakistan, you had to take a very long route back. It added about 5 hours to the entire journey. So we had to use commercial aircraft, military aircraft from the Kabul, Tajikistan sector, and civilian aircraft from the Tajikistan, India sectors. And of course, the challenge was how to get people to the airport. And I remember we had some sleepless nights, not just in Op Ganga, but also in Op Devi Shakti, when we had to get people out at night, and that was considered the best time because of various reasons. There was some, it was calmer, it was better to take people out at night, and there were as many as 15 roadblocks, which were mined by different elements of the Taliban, not the same groups, but different groups, and each roadblock had to be negotiated. You had to get a safe passage from a roadblock, go to the next one, again, conduct that safe passage. And there were very tense moments there because everybody was edgy and, trigger happy. So you never knew what would happen.
In conclusion, the Modi government in the last 11 years has at least very clearly been able to send a message: if you are an Indian and if you are in need, the government is there for you. And nothing sums it up better than what the former late foreign minister had said in a tweet at one point of time. Even if you are struck on Mars, the Indian embassy there will help you. And that, ladies and gentlemen, seems to be the central theme, the central pivot of Prime Minister Modi's foreign policy when it comes to Indians in need.